Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Shelli Dry, and I am the Director of Clinical Operations at Enable My Child. Tonight's webinar is on year-long readiness. Now that we've gotten everyone back to school, we want to look at ways to help them stay motivated throughout the school year. So let's start the presentation. Let me just share my screen. And I will give me just a minute here while I get the PowerPoint up. And I want to adjust that a little bit so it's in presentation mode. There we go. Okay. So as I said, tonight we're looking at year-long readiness and how to keep kids interested in learning throughout the year. A lot of times our kids, they start really fast and they're excited about school. And what we want to do is we want to keep that enthusiasm and keep that excitement going, because we want our kids to do their very best job and we want to help them do that. So our objectives for tonight. Of course, we're going to review those areas of school readiness and then discuss the methods for maintaining that readiness throughout the year and for developing some of those skills that's going to help the child take an interest in learning. We also want to explore methods for active listening and improving those listening skills, improving attendance, and improving participation in class routines. That's all going to happen through that motivation and enthusiasm for learning that we're working on developing. Okay. So, of course, school readiness is divided into several sections. We have our approaches to learning, and I'm going to go through each of these sections individually. So first we'll just discuss what they are. We have the approaches to learning. We have, of course, our health and physical well-being and how to stay healthy throughout the year. Language and communication plays a huge role in the readiness for school and for learning. And then, of course, our social and emotional development and that cognition and our general knowledge. So we want to look at all those areas when we're looking at the child's readiness for school. And as I've said, we're going to try to find ways to keep that motivation and readiness going throughout the year. So let's look at the approaches to learning. Now, the approach to learning is how the child uses the skills and knowledge, but it really relies on multiple things. Of course, it relies on their motivation for learning. So there's ways we can improve motivation. If you are working with the child's interest or incorporating their interest into every aspect of learning, or as much as you possibly can, they're going to do much better and have a motivation. Some children, though, they're just motivated to explore and learn a lot of new things in a lot of new areas. We also need to consider the child's style of learning. So if you've got more than one child that you're in your house, you know that some children will learn in a very noisy environment with the radio on and things going on, and that's how they learn best. And other children need to have it completely quiet, and they need to be sitting at the table or at their desk and just really have the environment, all the stimulation shut down so that they can learn. But not only that, a style of learning talks about, the children who learn better by touching and feeling and exploring with their hands, and they use all their senses for learning, those multisensory learners. And then you have other children who can just listen to what's being said, and they learn best that way. So they may be the child who listens to books on tape and who likes to watch videos about the things that the subject that they're learning. Or you have other children who don't do as well listening, but they do great reading. And if they can read something on a subject, then they can remember it. And then we have our kids who just need to write everything down. So everyone has their own style of learning. The trick is finding what works best for your individual child. from years and years of experience and from years of research, we know that each child has strengths in learning, but also when we use those strengths and find the learning approach that works best for their little individual self, we go a lot further and we get a lot further and a lot faster. So looking at their style of learning, really figuring it out. Sometimes it may take a few tries to figure out what works best. You may have to set them up in different scenarios and just work on finding whatever is going to make them successful. And then again, the child's approach to learning includes their interests for sure, because we want our children to be curious about learning and we want them to explore the world around them and find out new details about things. It's so fantastic when you see a child who is just first in school and they have all that enthusiasm for learning and they just want more knowledge and they start to make associations between things, and the excitement in their eyes is wonderful. So we want to keep that throughout the year. We want to use their interests. We want to encourage that curiosity and let them explore a little bit. Let them try different ways of learning, but let them kind of direct the learning and let it go in a little bit of a different direction than what you may have planned. And you may find out that your child's curiosity is going to lead them to new discoveries. And then, of course, we need natural engagement. Everyone knows you can't force something that's difficult on a child. So we need to find methods to get them engaged in learning, help them stay happy and healthy, and help them use that natural engagement, use things that motivate them to help them develop things, help them develop their new skills and knowledge. You can think about, think of a child whose topic of interest may be dinosaurs and all the different ways you can work with dinosaurs. Of course, you can incorporate those into math, but you can also incorporate, into history and studying the dinosaurs. And did this happen before the dinosaurs? How do you think the dinosaurs would have reacted? Just using their interest to develop that natural engagement will take you a long way towards helping your kids stay motivated throughout the year. And then, of course, one of the things that kids aren't as easy, don't always do easily, is that asking for help. So what we do want our kids to be willing to ask for help, and we want to encourage them to ask for help. So that's another area that you're going to look at. Are they able to ask for help? That's important when they're learning. They need to know how to do that. So if they're not asking for help, you've got to find a gentle way to prompt them. So the next section that helps with school readiness is that health and physical wellness. Of course, everyone knows that you need to feed your body, feed your nutrition, feed your body well in order to get healthy brain development. So we look at diet and we make sure our kids are eating regularly. But sleep is another area that really plays a huge role in how that child is going to be ready for learning the next day. So if you've had a bad night's sleep, you're not gonna be as motivated to start a new topic. And the same for your child. Look at how they've slept, because you can arrange their day into while they're learning at home, you can arrange their day so that you're doing some of those easier subjects at first and letting them become a little more awake, and then pile on that with some of the tougher subjects. And of course, part of health and physical wellness are those medical and dental checks. You want to make sure you're staying on top of that, and getting physical exercise, not just with your large muscle movements or your gross motor, but also those smaller muscles, and making sure that your kids are getting out and playing every day. It can't all be about work and learning, so we've got to make sure we throw in some fun. And then, of course, mental fitness and being able to feel good about yourself. So let's look at this little cartoon. This is just Snoopy, and he's talking about typing and how hard it is to work when you're tired. And so then, I jumped over, sorry. So Snoopy says, you know, Snoopy is talking here about how writing is hard work all the time and how writers need lots of rest. And then, of course, why writers need lots of rest? Because falling asleep at your typewriter can be very painful. So just a comedy, a little bit of comedy in our day. Let's look at language and communication. When you're looking at language and communication and its effect on knowledge, you have to look at everything that child is doing. Are they able to understand what is said? Are they able to follow your instructions? If not, how can you make it easier for them? Well, we all know that, of course, if a child can't follow multi-step instructions, you're gonna shorten your words and give them one-step instructions at a time. And you can kind of determine if they're understanding what is said by how well they're following those instructions. But also they need language and communication for interacting with others, because we're all going back to school eventually, hopefully, and if not, we're at least going to be able to return to social routines. So let's make sure they have the communication to interact with others and also to reflect back what they've learned. So that's one of your best methods. If your child is engaged and motivated in learning, they're going to be telling you about it. And then language and communication, it's so important for those literacy skills and being able to develop reading eventually and being able to write. It all takes, all these skills build on each other and they really help with learning. So the next section we're going to talk about is your emotional and social self. Again, we're working on school readiness. So let's look at all these things together and see, where our children are and make sure they are prepared for school. So some of the things you need to consider: can they follow rules? Can they follow routines? Does your child need help expressing their wants and needs? And that goes back to that communication piece. Are they going to be curious and motivated for learning? If not, how can we help them become more curious? Can we help them explore new things? Can we teach them new ways to explore? How about socializing with others? That's an important part of the whole school readiness, but it's also just an important part of development. So right now, if we can't get out and socialize with others, what things can we put in place that's going to set up a social activity? Can we create little social groups? And whether it's online or at the park or somewhere where we can be safe, there's ways around the COVID-19 pandemic and helping our kids stay socially ready. And then another important aspect: can your child work well by themselves? Because we want them to be more independent in their learning. We not only want them to take an interest and show motivation, but we want them to be able to be a little bit independent so they can continue moving up through the stages. Now this webinar is targeted for those ages 6 to 11. So if you think about your 6-year-old, they're just starting in school and they may not be great yet at really self-directing their learning, but there are things they can do on their own. So let's incorporate those things into their school learning day and help them learn ways not only to work alone, but to ask for help when needed. And then we also need our kids to be able to focus and listen. And there's lots of things you can put in place if they are having trouble in that area. So the final one we're going to look at for that school readiness is the cognitive and general development. Now, this subject could be a subject all of its own. It's too detailed for me to go into every aspect of it, but let's look at those main things we need, and then we'll look at those executive functions. We have children who need to be able to problem solve, of course. That's a big part of cognitive development. And then we need to help them learn how to focus and concentrate. Along with that, they've got to be decision makers. So you're going to have to maybe teach them that by putting more choices into their day and help them start to make decisions. Young kids, they get a little nervous when they're given too many choices, so you've got to narrow it down and make it easy for them to make a decision. And then you can work on expanding from there. And then, of course, creativity is the big part of cognition and general development. So we want to make sure we're addressing our child's creative side. And then our executive functions. So those are the things that really guide and direct. And when your executive functions are working well, then you are able to remember and relate things better. So some of the more important executive functions that you want to look at are mental flexibility. Can the child shift focus from one topic to another? Can they think in their mind and manipulate things in their mind? You're not going to see a lot of that in the early years, but we do expect to see that by age 11 at least, and a little bit before that, just at a lesser level. So can a child manipulate numbers in their mind? Can they do things like shift their focus from one activity to another? That's all going to encompass mental flexibility. And then impulse control, of course, is one of the executive functions that we know children need. They've got to be able to sit down for a good period of time for learning. So we need them to learn how to decrease some of their internal impulses. If they're always driven by their impulses, we need to teach them how to stop and think and plan things out before moving on. And then organization, that's another huge component of learning. Of course, a 6-year-old's going to need your help. They're going to need you to organize their day for you. 6, 7, 8, they're still going to need a lot of help with that organization piece and making sure that they can have all the things they need to be successful in school. So, there's some children, there's a lot of organization help out there, but a lot of children, they really work well if you can put their subjects into colored folders. And I know there's a lot of schools out there that are doing that. They're automatically doing that, and they're teaching they're sending home lists of you need a different color for each subject, and they're helping the kids put all their subject material on that folder. What they're doing is they're just teaching them organization early. And then you have the schools that are using planners and teaching kids to use planners. And that's another way to help them stay organized. So our schools are doing a lot to help kids stay organized, but they really need that parent support at home so that parents can follow through with some of those organization skills. And once it becomes a habit for kids, they get really good at it. So if we do it over and over and make it habitual, then our kids are going to get much better organization. And then focus and concentration, of course, that requires attention, your working memory, and the ability to self-monitor and know when you're not attending so you can draw yourself back in. If we look at working memory, we have games we can play to develop working memory if that's not your child's strength. You can, always work with your child on, I keep saying this, but I'm making those associations when they're learning something new, relating it to something they already know. And then, of course, self-monitoring. They've got to know when they're becoming distracted so that time doesn't go by and they don't realize what was said to them or what they've been reading. They need to learn to bring their mind back in and focus on their work. And then we look at some of these other areas of executive functioning. We can look at flexible thinking, and that's similar to that mental flexibility. So Can your child be flexible in their thoughts? Can they listen to what another person's idea? And can they then also work on planning and prioritizing? So prioritizing, I think everyone has times when they get distracted by something they shouldn't, and they just kind of have to keep it in mind what they need to be doing. So helping your kids prioritize their day and plan their day at the beginning is another great trick for working on those executive function skills that are going to help develop creativity and overall cognitive and general development. And then finally, of course, our kids need to have emotional control, but they also need to be able to initiate tasks, and they need to be able to give their best effort. And sometimes that best effort is going to require them doing things like standing up or altering their alertness levels in some way. As an OT, I'm going to tell you, do things like take a stretch break, stand up while you're working a little bit, even sometimes just changing position to laying on your belly on the floor if you're reading, but also changing the environment around you so that you decrease some of the sensation and you make it easier for the kids to learn. So do any of you have a hard to engage child? I think I see that as one of the complaints is that kids aren't motivated in certain aspects or certain subjects. So there's some things we can do. When our kids are having difficulty with engagement, we can, of course, provide those opportunities for choice. Now, that's where that decision making comes in. So, as I said earlier, if your child's very young and they have difficulty with choice, then you want to limit that to 2 items. And even if that's too hard for them, you can help them a little bit more. You can make their choices very obvious. Pick something they really love, and then something that's very so unimportant to them that they're not going to choose it. And that's going to help them learn to make a choice and to be happy with their choices. And then, of course, you can grade the level of assistance, and you want to do that. You don't want to always be the person who's solving the problems for your child, but you're going to have to start out that way maybe. You can help them become more motivated by helping them be successful. So you may have to jump in pretty hard at first and give them more assistance than what you think you need to. And then as they start to make improvement, don't forget to back up and let them take over some of that control. Another thing to work with our hard engaged children is to add structure and limit surprises. So I think everyone knows now how beneficial structure is since we've been living in this unstructured world for a while. And since all the structure was taken away from us for a little bit. But even now that things are starting to get back and people are developing new routines, we want to use those routines to give our child structure throughout their day. So if you're setting up a learning environment at home and you're thinking about lifelong readiness, you need to help them do things in about the same order every day. Help them get a routine, help them sit at the same area, and make their learning environment very structured and organized. And when the child has less surprises, they tend to do better when they're harder to engage. And of course, we want to appreciate every attempt. So we know no one's going to get everything right the first time, but the fact that they're trying, if they're harder to engage, we want to just definitely appreciate their attempts and accept what they've given us, and then we can make gentle suggestions if we need to. And finally, this is my favorite, is ending everything on success. So you can just end early if you know that at that point the child is being successful, and the next if you start something new, it might lead to them becoming frustrated. So ending on a success really helps the child improve their motivation and their engagement in learning. Do we have any questions yet? If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and I will stop and answer them. I've been kind of going through things a little bit fast and sometimes I need to slow down and ask if there's any questions, but I'm not seeing anything pop up. Really, you don't wait for me to ask. If anything comes to mind that you want to talk about or any problems you might have that we can work on solutions for, then just put that in the chat. So we've talked about our hard to engage child. Next, let's talk about altering attention. So those kids who have difficulty shifting attention or they have difficulty even focusing, what are some things that you all can do? One thing you can do is you can, of course, use those quieter voice tones. That helps because the child has to listen a little closer. The other thing is limiting the amount of words you're giving and decreasing the directions. And then remaining very sensitive to their cues. So you want to pay close attention to what's going on in your child's world. If they're telling you through body cues that they need a break, then it might be a good time to get up and move around. That's always helpful and beneficial when a child starts to get too wiggly and they need to get up. Just take that break and move around with them. So remain sensitive to their cues and also remove any of those extra distractions. So if you have to set your child up in a busy part of the house, you need to find a way to reposition your furniture so that they're in a semi-isolated area. So they don't have as much visual cute things going back and forth. Like if we're in this classroom, we're going to tell those children who have difficulty maintaining attention, we're going to suggest to the teachers that those children are closer to their desk and away from doors and windows. So think about the same thing when you're at home. If you can position the table in a little bit different way so that they might be facing the wall instead of facing out to see everyone that's coming and going, then that's going to be helpful for them. Other distractions you can decrease. Of course, you can decrease the amount of noise around them. You can have kids wear headphones. You can help them, like I said, some kids do better with music. And of course, you don't want words in the music, but you want just gentle music playing in the background if that helps them focus. That's another way to block out some of that extraneous noise that may be happening. And then another good trick is using those signal cues. So you may want to tap the table when they need to look and pay attention, because kids don't always want to hear, oh, look at your book. Oh, wait a minute, you're not doing this. It's better if you can just work out a cue and just a little tap, and then that might get them out of whatever was distracting them and back into what they're supposed to be focused on. So let's look at these couple of games for shifting focus. So the first game would be object exploration. And this is a fun game. You can play this outside of your school day, or you can take a break and play it at that time. But you might want to pick up anything that's around you, like the mouse. Okay, so pick it up and say, we're going to take a little break. We're going to explore this object. And what you want to do is teach your child to use all their senses to explore the object. So the first thing they're going to do is look at, what does it look like? And you might, what color? Yeah, we have lots of colors on this mouse. We have yellow and blue and red and purple. So it looks kind of silly with its big eyes, and just make it fun. And then the next thing, well, you're going to ask them what it feels like. Is it hard or soft? And I shifted there we go. Is it hard or soft? What does it feel like? Is it fuzzy? Does it feel good to your hands? How does it feel to your body? Does it have a smell? And encourage them to smell it. What does it sound like? Well, if you just hold it to your ear, it doesn't really sound anything. But what happens if we tap it? What's it sound like then? Again, you're exploring every part of their sensory system, those top 5, the external sensory system. And how does it taste? Of course, we're not going to taste the mouse. But you can do that. Just take time to teach your child how to become more mindfully aware of what's going on around them by playing these games of exploration. And then another game is sound hunt, and that's a good one. I like to set that up as a scavenger hunt and go outside. And so one of my 2-year-olds, they always, their favorite way to identify sounds is to say, what sound? What sound? And every time they hear something. So we play sound hunt where we might go out and listen for specific sounds. So you set it up as a scavenger hunt, and you can make it as hard or as easy as you want. You can say, oh, here's a picture of a tree. Can anyone hear the wind going through the tree? What about a train? Can you hear a train? And they can check it off as they hear it, but the idea is to get them, again, to become more mindfully aware of what's going on around them. Because when a child becomes mindfully focused, and then that, as you can see, will help them when they need to learn to shift focus. But then the other thing is just taking breaks throughout the day. So learning for 20, 30 minutes, and then getting up and taking a little bit of a movement break is going to help with their focus. Let's look at things you can do for working memory. It's so important for school readiness. And of course, we want to motivate these kids to be able to use those skills throughout the year. So one of the things you want to do, you want to teach your child how to make associations. And I feel like I've said that multiple times tonight already, but you want them to associate something they are learning now with something they already know. And once they start to make associations, that helps implant that new learning into their brain a little bit better. And it develops that memory, and then they can recall things a little bit easier. Guessing games are a great way to do working memory, and you can do that a multitude of ways. A lot of times you can do the game where you present a lot of items on a tray, and there might be 12 items, and you let the child look at those items. They've got to be somewhat familiar with them. It could be very functional items, a spoon, a bowl, a comb, things like that. Any type of thing the child's familiar with. Put it on a tray, let them look at it for 4 or 5 minutes, and then take the tray away. And then you want to wait a little while, maybe do something else, and come back and ask them, what do you remember? What was on that tray? And let them list out whatever they want. That's a fun game for kids. They like that because they like showing off what they know. So that's one good way to work on memory. But another one is to put items into a bag. So I like those big cloth bags, and you might put a couple items in, and you can let them feel it. There's a great game out there right now called Touch, and it has like a spaceship cover over it, and then it's got just a little bit of opening, and kids are given cards so they can see the objects, but they can't see them with their eyes, but they can see them on the card, and then they reach in and they have to find it just by feeling. So this other game is similar to that, where you just put a few objects in a bag and you don't let them see it. They just put their hand down in the bag and they feel around, and then they get to guess what they're feeling. So that's a lot of fun for kids. That's a good game for working on memory. And then you want to develop visualization skills. So that's fun when you have your child look at something and then shut their eyes and try to explain it, what they're seeing. But I also like to work with kids just looking at the clouds and things like that, and what can you see there. There's different ways to play visualization, but visualization really helps develop memory by helping kids develop pictures in their minds of what they're learning. So if you are learning new words, of course, everyone knows that when your kids are first learning sight words and things like that, they're going to see that word over and over. And they're going to learn to recognize it by sight, but you also want them to be able to shut their eyes and picture that word in their mind so that they start to develop a visual image in their memory. Another great thing for developing memory is chunking. So chunking a lot of different things together, it kind of goes with associations, but chunking things together works on memory. And then, of course, your multi-sensory learning and helping a child use all those senses like we've been talking about, helping them use their sense of touch, their sight, sense of sound, to smell, the taste, if it's something they can taste, finding different ways to bring in those multi-sensory learning activities. So that is our final slide, and we have another great cartoon. This one's by Calvin, and Calvin was having a little bit of trouble with his ability to shift his focus and to maintain attention. He looks at the clock, says, oh, it's almost 11 o'clock. Next section says, wow, the last 2 hours really flew by and time just seemed to go. But what's the last one? He says, oh, I hope the teacher didn't say anything important. Calvin really lets you know why it's so important for you to work on these school readiness skills throughout the year, but to help use that motivation and help find that child's interest so that they don't lose 2 hours hoping that the child did not say, hoping the teacher did not say anything important. So school readiness, you know, it's something that we are now learning to pay more attention to, but we also really want to look at, you know, what's going to motivate our child, what helps them become curious about learning, and then what are they interested in. And we just got to incorporate that into every day in our routines if we're teaching them at home. But if they're going off school, if you're in a state that allows your child to do that, and they're able to go away to school, you can work on that at home. You can go through things and help them develop those organization skills and those routines so that they're successful during the day when they're away from you. So thank you everyone for your participation tonight. If there's no questions, then I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. It's been great meeting with everybody.